How to dye wool garments with minimal shrinkage.
Dyeing wool can be tricky. Depending on the heat of the bath or the agitation required, sometimes it will shrink. Those are the two factors that cause wool to shrink: a temperature shock and agitation. Ideally, if you need to dye wool for a costume, if you can dye it when it's still yardage, before it's cut and sewn into the garment, that's best, because then any shrinkage that happens occurs before you cut it out. So the draper doesn't need to make any allowance for shrinkage. Sometimes a costume dyer is asked to dye a complete garment, either one stitched from woven fabric or one knitted from wool yarn. In this case, how do you minimize shrinkage? The first factor you can control is the temperature. It's the shock of wool going from room temperature to a hot temperature, almost boiling, that makes it shrink. Control the temperature of the bath. Put the wool into the bath when it's room temperature and slowly increase that temperature to the point at which the dye will react. And then once you've dyed it, you slowly reduce that temperature, let it cool off with the garment still in it before you rinse it with room temperature water and lay it out flat to dry. Agitation is the other factor that you have control over. You need to have some circulation of the garment in the bath, but it doesn't need to be vigorous and it doesn't need to be frequent. As long as you just move it around in that bath to make sure no section of the garment is twisted for the duration of the dye process, that will help minimize any shrinkage that would happen as well. When I need to dye a sweater or a pair of wool pants, the draper and I will take initial measurements of the garment before the dye process so that we can see after the dye process what, if any, shrinkage has occurred. If it's a sewn garment, like a pair of pants, and we think there might need to be some alterations that would happen, we will open those seams before the dyeing process so that we don't get resisted areas in the seam in case we need to let it out for shrinkage. So don't be afraid of dyeing a wool garment. It can be done without it shrinking up to the size of an infant. Pay attention to these variables and you'll minimize that shrinkage and have a successful outcome.
This sweater is hand knitted from 100% merino wool yarn. I successfully dyed it this dark teal shade from its original color of grass green with no shrinkage. Note how the synthetic zipper tape took the dye differently from the wool yarn. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Hit the bell for notification of new content, and join me on Thursday afternoons at 3 p.m. Eastern for my live studio stream.